So the reason that ratings matter, the reason that feedback matters, the reason that listening to customers is important at all is that you're really trying to keep your customer around for a long time. So the idea is retention and loyalty are what fundamentally matter to any business, and specifically in mobile apps, it's a big problem. So when people use us, they're not just getting better ratings, they're not just getting customer feedback, they're engaging in dialogues that help make the product better. They're reaching out and learning more from their customers and iterating in order to develop a service that people want to stick around for a longer time. And they're also doing something which is pretty natural to most of us in real life, which is that they're kind of reaching out and being kind and letting people know that they're there and they're listening. And so I think in real life businesses, a lot of what ends up creating our loyalty to a certain store, a certain vendor, a certain like sandwich maker, is about that like actual in-person touch, the kindness that they have for you. And we're doing the same thing inside of mobile apps, which leads to longer lasting relationships and retention. So in particular, when folks listen to their customers around the feedback that the customers initiate, they learn a lot of what is confusing, what questions people have, what common problems they might be facing. When they're using surveys, what they're doing most of the time, our customers are using surveys in a targeted manner to learn about a piece of the experience or to learn about the customer in more detail. Survey is a great way to structure information from consumers. So an example might be that after somebody goes through a new feature of yours, you use a survey in order to quickly understand if the feature was easy to use, if the customer felt like it was accomplishing their goals, if they felt successful around it, so that you can guide whether or not a new feature was successful or not. You can guide your decision making internally and understanding that internally pretty quickly, and then also guide what to do to make it better. That's an example of using a survey. But you could also use a survey in order to quickly learn more about certain types of customers. So for example, maybe your heaviest users, the people who come back most often, are in a specific demographic. Surveys are a good way to find that group and then ask them quickly about themselves, where they might be located, their ages, their interests, so that you can start to really parse out and learn more about the people who are using you most often. So surveys are pretty broad, but you see our customers using them in order to learn in structured manners about the customer, the audience base, and their desires. Sure. Actually, our website, if you went to apptentive.com and you looked at the customer section, you'll see a bunch of case studies around how we've helped out companies like Urban Spoon or Glimpse or Credit Sesame and many others. But a couple quick headlines around how people come back and say, wow, this is awesome, I love working with Apptentive. They get 5 to 10 times the ratings and reviews in the App Store. Those ratings and reviews tend to be more positive, moving up by a half star to 1.5 stars. They tend to hear from more of their frustrated consumers earlier so that they're able to address their problems. More often than not, they come back and tell us that when they hear from somebody who's frustrated and they talk to them, they not only learn from that customer, but that customer feels ingratiated and really connected and becomes a big fan of theirs, because that's pretty unique. And then ultimately, we're really focused on long-term retention. We think that's a big deal. We think loyalty is important. And so a lot of our customers, when they use our tools, see retention go up 15, 20, 30% across their base. And in fact, we find that when Apptentive is used to talk to a customer, the likelihood of that person returning is over 130% higher. So actually just starting a conversation with a customer leads to better outcomes, and that's across all of our customers. So that's a really hard question to answer. I think the reality is we're still early in mobile. And I think that the more we talk to people, I was down in San Francisco last week for Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference. The more we talk to people, the more we are reminded of how early it is in mobile. So most companies out there today in their mobile apps don't have anything really for customer feedback. If they do, it's not more sophisticated than an email link. Using tools that are like ours, using in-app surveys, creating outreach mechanisms. That stuff's really early days. I'd be surprised if it was more than 5% of people out there really using this, which is great because our customers then have almost an unfair advantage because they're doing things that they're really in advance of the rest of the people in the market, and it produces massive results. So ratings are important for several different reasons. The first and the most important reason is really that when consumers are trying to figure out what to download and what to put on their device, free or not, they have to make a choice about what's worth their time. And so ratings help consumers decide what's worth their time. We see it over and over again with customers we do studies with and with consumers we do research with. If an app is less than 3 stars, it's generally perceived as not being a very high quality app, not worth their time. Doesn't matter if it's free or paid. Sometimes if you're a big brand or you have an app that you just have to use for work purposes, that doesn't stop the person from downloading it, but it's definitely a barrier. So conversion rates from your App Store page to a download are driven a lot by that, and it just helps people make decisions. So that's number one, consumers. Number two is that the app stores are always looking for ways to identify great apps and also to minimize the exposure of poor apps. So ratings and reviews really factor into that. They help the app stores understand what is perceived by what number of people to be a great app using a very simple system. So as a result, their algorithms around returning search results, their algorithms around displaying apps that might be in the top categories, all lean on ratings and reviews. And in particular, the more that they're getting sophisticated around this, the more that they're looking for signals around changes. So the volume of ratings and reviews in your App Store profile can indicate to them that more people are really a big fan of your app and that it's moving in the right direction, or conversely that something's happened, that crashes are happening, and that they should diminish its position in the App Store, for example. So those are signals that the app stores use. And then Google Play in particular has taken a personalization approach to displaying results in the App Store. And so the more that people rate and review apps in your social graph, the more likely those apps are to show up as potential recommendations for you or as search results. And so those are many of the ways in which ratings really impact app stores. In general, we're a big fan of anything that allows the people who make the apps to talk with their customers. We think that that's always valuable. So in principle, totally a fan of it. In practice, what we hear from people on a regular basis is that it's frustrating. It's frustrating because the conversation happens in public, and so instead of being a really productive dialogue, it oftentimes can be somewhat of a frustrating one because people know that they have an audience with which to vent, and being in public, you maybe are not as constructive as you otherwise would be when it's in private. And then the actual mechanisms for managing the feedback and the conversations are really kludgy. Once you've heard from a customer and then you've responded, you have to edit your existing responses in order to continue the conversation, and people don't get notified. And so it ends up being really challenging to have a meaningful dialogue given the tools that they have. So we're big fans of the idea, but we hear it's frustrating in practice. So we don't really think about it as a campaign. We think this is an ongoing opportunity to talk to customers. So that's number one, is to think about it as a piece of your relationship building and your understanding of your customer base as opposed to a campaign for getting ratings. Ratings are an outcome of happy customers. Well, good ratings are an outcome of happy customers. Ratings are an outcome of customer feelings. But so number one, you have to think about it as an ongoing relationship. Number two, you have to think about your app as a unique set of experiences you've put together. And so that means that you should do a couple things. You should think about moments of success inside your app when people have really meaningful interactions with your app. They're accomplishing the goals you think that they set out to. If you're a game, that might mean that you passed the first level. But if you're a utility, that might mean that you've added the first thing to your to-do list. Each app has a different success moment and hopefully multiple success moments. So think of that about those moments of success, and also think about the moments of completion when people are ready to be talked to. So that's the second point. The third thing is that you have to iterate around this. If you don't have data around how you're reaching out to customers for ratings or for surveys or any other purpose, if you don't know how many people see it and then how many people complete it, you don't know if you're doing a good job. And what I mean by that is you don't know whether or not you're bothering your end consumer. And if you're bothering your end consumer in pursuit of ratings, then you've messed up. So you should be instrumenting this, tracking it, and having the data so that you can do the fourth thing, which is really iterate. Like, you have to take a look at this, again, as an ongoing set of relationships with customers, and so you're going to change your settings. You might say that after somebody's hit the third level in your game, you want to ask them how they're feeling about your app. Once you have the data, you might decide that the third level is too late and the second or first level is actually an appropriate place to do it. Or you might decide that the third level is too soon and you want to do it after the fifth level only for people who have made an in-app purchase. With data comes that ability to iterate, and if you iterate, you get much better. And then the fifth thing really to do about all of this stuff, and it brings this together on an ongoing basis, is listen. So when people aren't really happy with your app, if you're reaching out and you're figuring out who might be a fan of your app in order to get them to rate you in the App Store, the people who aren't happy, the people who have frustrations or don't say that they love you yet, making sure that you're listening to why and that you're taking that in and then you're making your app better, that's going to long-term help you the most because you'll be developing a great app. So we definitely get the question about how challenging it is to put multiple SDKs into an app from people who are not actually spending a lot of time in the ecosystem and building big, successful apps. Because the people building big, successful apps just look at SDKs as tools to help them accomplish their goals. And if that SDK that somebody comes along with, like ours, is going to help them accomplish their goals, it's worth it. It's very common at this point in software development to use other tools. You know, you'll go to a website, and the website will be probably using 10, 15, 20 other services to track analytics, for example, to track how people go through the funnel, to use a payment processor in order to take your credit card. So SDKs are not really very different from those sorts of tools, and companies will pick and choose what helps them really grow their business.